with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, August 24th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live from my apartment, steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Heather Berg, professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies at Wash U in St. Louis, and author of Porn Work, Sex, Labor, and Late Capitalism. Meanwhile, primary day was yesterday in New York and Florida, plus a special election on the Republican side in Oklahoma. Jerry Nadler trounced Carolyn Maloney in a battle of the incumbents in the newly redrawn 12th district encompassing Upper Manhattan. In New York's 19th special election, Democrat Pat Ryan defeated his Republican opponent in a purple district, maintaining a Democratic seat. And Ryan made the race about abortion. Another good indicator that Democrats need to make this the issue in the fall. This comes as voter registration data for women show massive influxes in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. The corporatist Levi Strauss heir, Dan Goldman, is narrowly leading progressive Yulee New in New York 10 after the left vote was split 3 ways. Goldman is unfortunately likely to hold on. On the state Senate front, Kristen Gonzalez crushed her primary. Excellent news. Jabari Brisport, Gustavo Rivera also held on. In Florida's 10th district, Bernie Sanders endorsed Maxwell Frost has won his race, handily. That's some more good news. And former Republican Charlie Crist will be on the Democratic ticket against Ron DeSantis in the fall. Jeff Stein of the Washington Post is now reporting that in addition to the $10,000 of student debt cancellation, which is now apparently set in stone, Biden is also considering $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. All this is still means tested, meaning you have to make under $125K to be eligible, but at least it's something. A Louisville cop has pled guilty to the feds for lying on the Breonna Taylor search warrant that led to her killing. She's expected to flip on her colleagues now. You love to see it. The American Prospect is reporting that Nancy Pelosi quietly put Social Security expansion on ice in favor of tax breaks for wealthy retirees. Speaks for itself. A new letter from the National Archives claims Trump took more than 700 pages of classified documents. That number just keeps on growing. And lastly, the US and Iran are reportedly inching closer on a new nuclear deal. Good news there, and fingers crossed. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the Majority Report, everybody. I am still doing the show remotely out of an abundance of caution for my friends and colleagues, Bradley and Matt. What's up, guys? How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah. Well, I think the three of us all voted for Yulee, at least, I mean, I don't actually, Bradley, I don't know if you did. But...
Do not spoil the sanctity of my private ballot.
That's a private question.
I'm sorry, was that a HIPAA violation?
That's a violation of my HIPAA rights.
At least I did. And I've been open about that because it was a bit of at first glance, before I did really enough research into the race, you're like, well, there's a few good progressives in this race, Mondaire Jones, Carlina Rivera, but Yulene had the best chance to defeat Dan Goldman. And right now it's not looking that great. I want to do a bit of a dive into the results from yesterday because they were significant. And the big fish, the big races where on national level progressives could have made gains, it didn't turn out super well. But on the state Senate front and in terms of beating back some of the worst corporatists in the Democratic Party, there was actually a lot of good news in New York. And in Florida, I don't want to gloss over Maxwell Frost's win in the Florida 10th district. He was a strong progressive gun control advocate in the state, and he defeated Alan Grayson, who for some reason decided to run again. And he was endorsed by Bernie Sanders. So that was a good victory, and he will be, if he wins in the fall, the first Gen Z representative ever, which, that's interesting, but I care more about his policy stances, and they're good. They're good. So that's an encouraging sign out of the Orlando area in Florida. Were you trying to say something, Matt?
No, I just think it's good that we have a Gen Z guy now.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the team.
Very cool. And but the big stories, I think, for the left, for the most part, are coming out of New York State today. And there were some wins. I want to point that out. Jamal Bowman held on to his seat despite being redistricted. Initially, the DCCC was trying to get him and Mondaire Jones to face off against each other. We'll get to a clip of him, and I asked him a question last night on TYT's election coverage about that very question in a little bit. But Mondaire Jones decided to run in New York 10 instead. He was kind of put in an impossible situation, but luckily, Jamal Bowman did hold on, and he will remain in Congress. And on the state Senate front, Gustavo Rivera, as I mentioned, who we had on the Majority Report live show in Brooklyn, held on to his seat. Jabari Brisport also held on, a DSA state senator.
And not just held on. I just got to say, he won. He crushed. He got over 60% of the vote.
Yeah, and there was a lot of money, of course, flooded into that race. I believe Eric Adams also endorsed his opponent. Am I wrong? So that was a great win as well. And of course, the big thing that Kristen Gonzalez trounced Crowley. And for me, it makes me feel happy about my decision, at least. And Matt, I don't know about you, but just be very vocal in our support of Kristen Gonzalez, because we saw that the left vote got split in New York 10. And that was something we wanted to desperately avoid.
And I mean, I'm glad that, I just try to cut in, but I think it is it's a good example. And I think Nomiki did the right thing by dropping out and endorsing Gonzalez before the race. And we avoided pretty late. Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, earlier than the folks who were in the way of Yulene, because they never did. And at some point we need to get to a point where we realize what's happening and people drop out.
We have to be strategic. I mean,
and this is why it's good to have the DSA as the slate sort of strategy that seems pretty vindicated. I just want to mention David Alexis lost his race. Hopefully he can win next time. But he was one part of the slate that didn't win. But yeah, the Gonzalez and Jabari are they crushed. And
now that means there are 3 DSA state senators, which is awesome. So let's play a little bit of Kristen Gonzalez's victory speech. Again, that the DSA really building its institutional power in New York State with 3 state senators being open socialists, which is really exciting. Here's Kristen Gonzalez announcing that Crowley had conceded.
but today we really proved that socialism wins. We are not going anywhere, and we will not stop until we see a socialist slate across this city. All right, now let's let everybody else in, and let's drink, y'all.
Awesome. I mean, I'm super excited that she won, and she won by such decisive margins. And on the national level, there were, as I mentioned in headlines, some positive takeaways too. Pat Ryan won in a district that could have gone either way if circumstances were a little different, but he smartly made the decision to put abortion front and center in his special election against a Republican, and he ended up winning. So the Democrats will hold on to a blue seat there. New York 3 also avoided the worst outcome. Melanie DeRigo, she didn't do as well as I would have hoped. I really liked her as a candidate, but the no labels guy, Lafazin, did end up getting defeated by Zimmerman at the very least. Gottheimer was all about the Joshua Lafazin candidate. So, I mean, again, that was a worst case scenario that was avoided. And as I mentioned earlier, Jerry Nadler trounced Carolyn Maloney in the battle of the incumbents in the Upper East and Upper West Side new district in Manhattan. He's probably the better option there too. So that is some better news. Nadler was endorsed by the New York Times, which brings me to New York 10 and the Levi Strauss heir corporatist Dan Goldman. The Times got some flack for endorsing 3 white guys in races that were incredibly diverse. And also, the diversity was reflected by the fact that a lot of the candidates who were women or people of color were also more progressive. Goldman was by far the most conservative frontrunner in New York 10, and it looks like he's going to hang on in that race. And he has connections due to being a very wealthy child with the family that owns the New York Times, their family friends, and they endorsed him, which is a bit of controversy to say the least. And I know for some people, you might be like, why does a New York Times endorsement matter? For a specific class of New Yorker, upper class New Yorkers, the New York Times is the Bible. And I do think that played a role in Nadler's race. And I do think it played a role in putting Goldman a little bit over the top in New York 10. And look, it's still, in my opinion, a little too close to call because there's absentee ballots that have to be counted. But Yulee knew it's going to be a hard uphill battle for her to defeat Goldman with this percentage of the vote total, and it's around 98% at this point. But back to our point about vote splitting, Mondaire Jones, Carlina Rivera did significantly well as 2 other progressive candidates behind Yulee New. Together, they won 28,000 votes, and Goldman had 16,700. Now, of course, it's no guarantee, and this is just as of now, by the way. It's no guarantee that all of those votes would have gone to Yulee had they coalesced behind her, but I am positive that if that had happened a little bit earlier, Yulee would have won this race. Yep. Go on, Matt.
No, I just wanted to underline that is the lesson, and it's a shame because it like, despite this like the success, Gonzalez was also like strong in Manhattan, and you look at the strength of these 3 progressive candidates that all split the vote, and it would have been a big win over Goldman if the Ducks could have got in a row.
Yeah, and here's Yulee New talking a bit about the results of the election. She's not yet conceded. Of course, Dan Goldman has already declared victory, which is premature, but it's likely that he will hold on. Here's Yulee New really strong candidate. And again, she has great policy positions outside of this, but her support for DSA indicates a level of political bravery that I think puts her over the top, and that's why I voted for her in New York 10. Here she is last night.
I know that tonight's results aren't yet what we hope to hear, but we will not concede until we count every vote. Because what we can do together is too important to give up this fight. Our vision is that we sent a powerful mission and powerful message this election. We sent the message that things can get better, that things can change, that people can take back control of their government. I know that.
Look, she should run again regardless. Her assembly district, when she was a member of the state assembly, is 100% of it is encompassed in this new district. So she has a lot of connections to the area, has a lot of political capital built up because of that, and I think has a strong infrastructure to make a second run at this. But the story here is that Mondaire Jones ran in this district despite, not really it not being close, honestly, to his old district that he was shoved out of by DCCC Chair Sean Patrick Maloney, who ended up beating Alessandra Biaggi, a progressive, pretty handily. And frankly, I think Mondaire Jones, now that I've slept on it, should have stayed in that district. I think he would have had a better shot. But based on name recognition alone, he took a huge chunk of her votes. And look, he was put in an impossible position. And if you're an incumbent, the pressures to run and try to maintain power are everywhere in Washington. Being an incumbent means you're a priest to these people. Incumbency and maintaining power, the incentive structure for that is so strong. And so I am sympathetic to his position. And the fact that, of course, he didn't want to run against Maloney, the DCCC chair, where all the institutional power would be on his side. And he didn't want to run against his friend and fellow progressive Jamal Bowman. Mondaire didn't want to do that. And so he ran in New York 10, and it didn't work out for him, but he still got a significant portion of the vote, and it took away from Eulene's total. And Goldman just blitzed this area. I mean, I'm in this district, as I mentioned.
I got so many texts from Goldman.
Man, every ad, everywhere. And he used almost $5 million of his own money. And particularly in the later parts of the race, approaching yesterday, he went hard, especially with TV ads, which
$5
I think is
of his own out of $250 million of his net worth.
Nothing.
Loaded. The guy is loaded.
And he can probably get reimbursed for that, right? Based on campaign finance laws. So it's a bit of a depressing outcome in that race, but we were just so close. But the rest of the totality of the state was a success.
And it shows the virtue of a sort of organizing or disciplining force like the DSA, and the absence was missed in that race.
Yep. So I really hope Eulene runs again. But
me too.
That's all for that.
Yeah, we gotta get Goldman out of here. Well, let's keep an eye on Goldman. If any New York political watchers can just, if you see Goldman, whatever he does that is sort of going to make this victory useful to the folks who wanted him to win, like the special interests, we should keep an eye on Goldman and try to get him out.
100%. Before we head into the break, we have a message from one of our favorite sponsors, Aura. Aura is identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, and antivirus software all combined into one easy-to-use app. You might have already used one of these services already, but if you don't have all the tools, it's like locking the front door but leaving the back door wide open. Those who have had their identity stolen, which is a growing crime in this country, are often shocked when it happens. Imagine trying to log into your email account one day only to see the password had changed hours ago. And then you start getting notifications of activity from your bank and credit cards. That's scary. And unfortunately, it's a reality for one American every 14 seconds. Thankfully, Aura monitors the dark web for your emails, passwords, and social security numbers and sends alerts fast right to your phone and email. Aura also gives you near real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like someone was opening a loan or credit card in your name. Protect your family and yourself from identity theft at aura.com/majority. When you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link so you can see for yourself how many times Aura finds you or your family members' personal info on the dark web. And if you sign up, let me know in the comments below if your personal information has been compromised. You will not regret checking. Again, that's Aura, AURA.com/majority to try Aura free for 14 days. That's Aura, AURA.com/majority to try Aura free for 14 days. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Heather Berg to talk about her book, Porn Work, Sex Labor, and Late Capitalism. We are back, and we are joined now by Heather Berg, professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies at Washington University in St. Louis, author of Porn Work, Sex Labor, and Late Capitalism. Heather, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, your book is excellent, and it's essentially a class-based analysis of porn and sex work within porn more broadly. So why did you choose to explore this kind of sex work, because there's a lot of different kinds, and this kind of sex work through the lens that puts the labor of that work front and center?
Yeah, I mean, I chose to focus on porn for a couple of reasons. One is because I think that it's kind of in between status as gray market work that becomes criminalized sometimes, but isn't criminalized under US law. But it's certainly gig work, is certainly precarious work, positions porn workers to have something to say, both to folks who are interested in questions around criminalization and the carceral state, but also to folks who are interested in the problems of gig work in 2022. And so I think porn work sitting at that intersection allows us to have both of those kind of conversations. I also think that the hyper visibility of porn has encouraged a lot of civilians, non-sex workers, to focus just on questions of representation. So feminists in particular have focused a lot on what porn looks like to them, what they think porn means for people who watch it, but much less so on questions of work. And I think that the fact that it's on film lets people kind of make that move. And so that leads me, I guess, to your second question, which is why the labor piece. And so part of that was to kind of correct this tendency to focus on consumption and on representation. But again, I also just think porn workers have so much to say about the conditions of work in this moment.
Well, I mean, there really seems to be a gap in labor scholarship about it, honestly, because I feel that even within further left circles, whatever, sex work like this, it's almost an industry that has an invisibility. I mean, people, of course, consume porn regularly, but in terms of an understanding of what the industry means and the labor dynamics behind it, there's a lack of, I think, curiosity to a degree to understand what that entails. And there's, of course, crew, performers, as well as producers and other people. And you interviewed over 80 of them. What were your main takeaways from some of those interviews about that very dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer that, but I'll just say first that I think in addition to the lack of curiosity you describe, it's a sense that people think that they know what that work looks like. So it's the lack of curiosity, but also this like real certainty, about already knowing the answers. So, but yeah, some of the main takeaways, I think one of the biggest ones is really just the kind of mundanity of porn work for a lot of people, obviously for crew, but for performers too. The life on a porn set is more boring than it is titillating. But there's also a lot of like everyday moments of camaraderie and playfulness that I think people, on the other side, people who think this must be just the most violent work possible miss. But porn set is not really a sexy place, and I think some viewers don't want to hear that. But it is really it feels like clocking in for a lot of people. Not always, not all the time, but I think that the sense that like most days on set are pretty boring, pretty long. The kind of hurrying up and wait that people in all sorts of creative industries can identify with. Another takeaway for me that was really, really clear at the end of these interviews was that for so many people, the conditions of porn work are not good, that certainly can't be overstated, but that they're so much better than the other jobs that working class people do. So a lot of people turn to porn for reasons that have very little to do with the sex piece and have a lot to do with what it means to be able to create your own schedule, to make in a few hours what a lot of people make in a week, and also just have a little more control over your day is huge for caretakers, for people with disabilities, for students, for activists. And so I think in some ways that people's stories of entering the business tell us more about the things they left than about porn itself.
Well, and what I loved about your analysis too is that it differs from, I think, a more, I'll put it uncharitably, outdated feminist lens by which porn has been discussed decades before. Like, I'll even have this discussion with, say, my mother, right, who identifies as like a feminist, but maybe from an older generation. And it is more anti-porn, a little bit more sexually conservative, pro. It basically views porn largely as exploitative of women and the industry in and of itself. But your work doesn't shy away from the fact that it is work and it can be exploitative, but there are, gradations and empowering elements to it as well that I think makes it a more complex topic than, I don't know, older feminist theory might suggest.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say, as a Marxist, I would say that all work is exploitative and also no work is empowering, but that workers are really smart and creative about struggling within the conditions of work. So it's both things at the same time. I don't think there's anything empowering for any of us in working for a wage. But yeah, there are all sorts of ways that porn workers both use porn itself in contrast to non-sex work jobs, but also within porn work itself, hack its conditions and get really creative. I also have these conversations with my mom, who's a feminist, and now her favorite thing is to like troll people who say anti-sex worker things and say like, well, sex workers like their job better than people like serving you at a grocery store, and then kind of see how that lands. So that's her tack at this point.
Well, maybe I will deliver your book under the Christmas tree this for her, because that could be fun. But your book is very front facing in the fact that it's a Marxist analysis, which I really loved. But what makes the class divisions and labor consciousness within porn work distinct from other industries?
Yeah, I think, because so many people seek out porn work, at least in part because it allows you the ability to be your own boss. And I don't say that in a romantic sense or to say that it's like this empowering frontier, but for a lot of people, it does ensure more autonomy. And a lot of people have all sorts of reasons not to want to work under a single boss, that they share with other gig workers. And then they also share the forms of uncertainty that come up with that. But what's different about porn is that, unlike driving for Uber, unlike working gig delivery, you can actually work for yourself in ways that are less subject to the whims of the platform. And there are all sorts of ways, and I'm sure we'll get to this, that platforms exert control over sex workers' lives that can be really violent and exploitative.
OnlyFans, almost sorry to cut you off, but OnlyFans flirted with essentially removing the ability for work for thousands and thousands of porn workers. What was that, a few months ago? And they backtracked, thankfully, but they were at the whims of that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And we can talk about the policy reasons behind that. But to your question about what makes this different, in terms of the everyday, the kinds of autonomy that you can kind of wrest from directors and producers are markedly different than, say, a rideshare driver. And that is good for workers. It changes what porn looks like. It changes what it feels like to make it. But it also means that, when I set out to do interviews with porn workers as such, I found out really quickly that very few people identify as only that. And so for labor scholarship, but also for labor movements, that's kind of a crisis, because we've always focused on workers who are subject to a boss's control and might organize together against that control. But when people not only can be their own boss, but in the space of a day or a work week, direct films in which they hire others, then this absolutely changes how people see questions of policy and also, just the kind of politics of the work.
So there's a fluidity to some of the power dynamics that might not exist in other industries. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's not something that most people in food service can think about, like what it would mean to just do your own pop-up. It's not something that I can do as a professor. There are all sorts of ways that I think a lot of people make assumptions about porn based on their experience of their own jobs. But this really is something that's different.
Was that a challenge when writing this, that traditional class divisions were not a useful lens to view this through?
Yeah, it was a really welcome challenge. I mean, it changed my politics. I think I came in with a certain kind of a more orthodox Marxist sense of how class works, and what communities we should be fighting with and for, and performers were really patient with me in getting me to understand that what they wanted wasn't slightly better conditions, but to remain under bosses. And so that absolutely changes how we write, labor history, but also like what organizing and policy demands might look like.
So I'm wondering if we could go a little bit through the history of porn work, sure. Because I think this is a silly thing to say, but I became fascinated by this by watching The Deuce, which kind of goes through it, sure. Which is a great show if people want to check that out. But it begins really in the 1970s, the golden age of pornography, where you have these big theatrical releases like Deep Throat. And then, of course, the dynamics change really rapidly. If you don't mind taking us through that history.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll try to give you the quick and dirty version, which is to say that the kind of, I think one common narrative is that there was this golden age of porn that the Deuce touches on, but also I think rightfully shows that making loops in the 70s didn't look that much different from making one-off scenes for Gonzo Productions in the 2010s. What changes is not, and this is where I think the common narrative goes wrong, is the sense that porn used to be filmic, that it was like mostly films like The Devil and Miss Jones or Deep Throat, that it used to be real acting and then that changed over time. But in reality, since the advent of porn on film, most productions have been low budget. Most performers have been pretty low paid. What's changed hugely, though, and this moves alongside shifts in technology and access to distribution, is the cost of production and thus also the availability of self-production for everyday performers. So what you see in the Deuce is that even though production is pretty low budget, it is in some ways exclusive to people who can afford the camera equipment and have access to often mob affiliated distribution networks, and all of this. And so we see just this progressive erosion of that kind of monopoly as technology gets democratized in a sense. So video in the 1980s is cheaper, somewhat more accessible, but people are still subject to kind of calcified distribution networks. And that gave kind of old school production studios and producers like a lot of power to determine the conditions of work. That maintains through much of the DVD era, but now in the age of OnlyFans, anyone can produce and distribute their own content, and that has had a huge change for what that means for working conditions. So that's my quick version.
I mean, I'm hoping, if you don't mind, if we can dive into it even more, just because when video becomes the thing in the 1980s, how did that affect the labor dynamics? Like, how did that affect pay for workers? And this is both performers, people behind the scenes as well, production crew. And also HIV/AIDS comes to the fore during that time. What happened in the 80s that, then we can transition to the 90s?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so what this means, to your first question, what this means for pay and working conditions, as profits just soared during this time. The availability of at-home video viewing absolutely changed the market. And this, at the same time as video became cheaper to produce than film in the 1970s. And so studios stood to make a lot more money and we don't have to get into like the minutia of the law, but as obscenity charges become less and less likely, it becomes less important to have mob affiliations in order to ensure safe distribution. So in some ways, the business becomes corporatized and a bit more above ground. With the kind of explosion of profit and production, gonzo or kind of one-off scenes become more ubiquitous, and we see less investment in like an hour-and-a-half film, something like Devil and Miss Jones. And so for working conditions, that has some contradictory effects. More work is available, particularly to people who weren't plugged into the old kind of social networks that made possible the kind of social world that you're describing in The Deuce, for example. But the work in some ways becomes more intensive. There's less, it's true that in a lot of those films, there is less acting, there is more hardcore sex, which some people prefer. Some people found the acting tedious and found the more hardcore scenes more fun to shoot, but it becomes harder on your body. And people tend to do more scenes in the space of a week, things like that, rather than shooting for 2 weeks at a time. So you can stand to make a lot more money in any given work week in this moment, but the conditions of work intensify in some other ways. And then, yeah, in terms
and
of—
I'm sorry to cut in really quickly,
Sure.
but the hardcore scenes, I think, is kind of where, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the feminists in that time became anti-porn and a little bit more pro-censorship, as opposed to maybe, I think, more updated intersectional thought in the current climate, where I think, feminist scholarship has evolved beyond that.
In some ways, there's a huge— yeah, I mean, the anti-porn feminist movement right now is hugely powerful. It has in many ways come to understand that fighting around obscenity is not a winning strategy, both legally and because it has less cultural cachet. But you can see the power of anti-porn feminism, including in the kind of old ways that we're now used to, these somewhat counterintuitive allegiances with the Christian right around manufactured panics over porn as a public health crisis, particularly for teenage boys. That absolutely has not waned. I think that's only increased, as well as anti-porn and anti-sex worker lobbying that comes in under cover of fake concern over trafficking. So both of those things have increased, I think, dramatically.
And then we move to the mid 90s, and then
Sure.
we have digital porn, and that
Right.
must be a complete shock to the industry. You have piracy sites that are putting up this content for free. It's the wild, wild west, and workers bear the brunt of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get there, I do want to answer your question about the role of HIV/AIDS in the late 1980s.
Oh, yes.
And so I mean, what I'll say about that, and in some ways it's linked to my answer about digital, is that yes, a lot of these shifts come as a shock to the industry, but also that people in the industry and sex workers more broadly have often been at the forefront of movements to meet the challenges of, in this case, like a public health crisis. And so it was porn workers themselves who developed testing standards that helped keep each other safe, in ways that were far more advanced than a lot of other sectors of the population who were confronting the virus. So that's one piece there. You also have at around the same moment the invention of Viagra, and that changes to the kind of labor market for who can plausibly perform in a scene. But yeah, we can get to the digital if you're ready.
Yeah, I am. I'm just curious about that time period because, as I say, it's the wild, wild west. There is, it explodes exploitation to a degree because of, and I mean that in terms of like just strictly labor exploitation, because people are accessing all of this content and watching porn without the commensurate compensation for the workers involved. And based on just cultural attitudes about porn and wanting it to be seen but only consumed and not reckoned with as an industry in and of itself, I think that would increase the volatility of the labor dynamics, because basically people there's no effort at any kind of regulation or sunlight on some of these practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think the thing I'll say about the piracy piece is that because there was no structure in place for porn performers to get residuals for films, and they were required to sign modeling releases that gave producers complete control over what happened to a scene after it was shot. So you would get paid once a day rate for a scene, and then a studio could chop that up a dozen ways. So there, you can see this if you look on porn's version of IMDb, for example. It'll look as though someone has filmed like 20,000 scenes in the 90s. And that's people who filmed a lot, but it's more so that they're scenes for which they were paid just once and never received royalties, got chopped up a million different ways, resold, rebranded under different DVD names. So that's all to say, yeah, piracy was a crisis for the industry, but it hit of course, it hit the people who were making more money off of scenes more than it hit performers who were paid a day rate anyway. So there are some performers from that time who talked to me about, how violating piracy felt to them, to know that their content was being distributed without any compensation. And then there are others who said, this was already true. Like, it's the question of whether producers are doing it or some guy on what would come to be Pornhub.
And then we move kind of to the current era where there is a benefit to the fact that performers can perform in the safety of their own home.
Right.
There's subscription services, OnlyFans, but then you're at the whim of the algorithm, as we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What has that meant for the labor dynamics at play?
Yeah. I mean, so to be at the whim of the algorithm, and I will say OnlyFans doesn't work under an algorithmic model, and I won't get into like the specificity of the tech there, but that's just a note that the setup is a bit different. It instead requires a ton of self-marketing from performers to bring people to their particular pages, which means that they're at the whim of all sorts of other algorithms, whether that be Twitter or whatever. But there are all sorts of ways that this kind of digital management acts on people's working conditions. In particular, the fact that platforms like OnlyFans don't really offer anything. In some ways, it's like even less of a service to workers than Uber, which is also enacting control through its monopoly in all sorts of ways. But that's to say, like, OnlyFans takes a huge cut in exchange for pretty nominal interference between workers and consumers. But the reason that performers have to use these platforms in the first place is because of anti-sex worker policy, which makes it impossible for them to use mainstream platforms to distribute. And so that's one piece of the puzzle. I'll pause there and see if there...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wasn't aware of the algorithm, and I kind of say that more generally just because it's, or I guess they're at the whims of whatever corporate executives decide is their future. And that's a boss in and of itself, right? If you're just essentially at the whim of a corporate structure and how they're going to just blow up the terms of service one day and your entire way of making a living could be destroyed, that is there's a late stage capitalism lens that you can view that through, where your personal life and your own and your work life has kind of melded to a degree, and you're much more reliant on marketing and putting oneself out there as opposed to traditional corporate structures that might have been more prevalent decades previously.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet all of that's true. And also a lot of people still find that model preferable to having a human boss breathing down your neck. And so I think our task as people who care about working conditions is to take both of those things seriously.
I mean, it's a little bit resonant for me, right? Because I create content on the internet, and I do have a boss, but to a degree it's very different, and I find that preferable, even if it's a little bit more precarious and reliant on if people are going to click on our content or not. So I did resonate with that with that part of what you wrote about here, and I did want to touch on, of course, the history of discrimination and disparate treatment for non-white performers, disabled performers, LGBTQ performers, and more in talking to a bunch of these people, what was some of what you gleaned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the striking things is how to the extreme extent to which markets for certain kinds of scenes and representations and bodies have very little to do with what people are actually paid. So what agents and old school directors and producers, by which I'm using that as kind of shorthand for people who aren't also performers, although there's some overlap there. But what they told me again and again when I asked about, say, racist pay differentials, was like, it's just about the market. But if you look at the books, and they're all private, so if people let you look at their books, you'll see that what are called interracial scenes, for example, market really well. People will pay for them. They're some of the most popular kinds of scenes. It's just that these good old boys decided to pay people less. And so that's really striking to me. Another thing is, the really impressive organizing that people have done to push against this. One campaign right now that's really exciting is the BIPOC Adult Industry Collective, that's working both to contest racist pay inequality and inequality in conditions on more traditional sets, but also to give people the tools to self-produce so that they don't have to deal with a boss at all. And so I guess that's maybe the third thing, is the centrality in these organizing campaigns of not just what we might see from more traditional trade unions, right? Like making demands of a class of management, but also giving people the tools to circumvent management altogether. And so that also applies to the other communities that you mentioned, right? So to especially to trans performers who have a lot of reason not to want to perform under traditional models.
And in terms of those reasons, do you mind elaborating on that?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think a big piece there is that, again, the traditional agents, producers, directors have these really calcified ideas about what markets look like, what people will buy. And as always, like, sex workers are the ones actually dealing with fans. And so they have a much better sense of what the market looks like. But some, like, middle-aged cis white guy will tell me that no one will buy scenes, no one will pay for scenes featuring trans women unless they're marketed using anti-trans slurs and using the most kind of predictable sets of sexual dynamics where, for example, you have to have, and this obviously has implications for working conditions, but where trans women performers are expected to undergo hormone regimens that make them look super traditionally feminine, but also be able to get an erection because these producers think that the only market is for trans women who can top. So this isn't necessarily true of what consumers actually want. That's not to say that consumers aren't, we're all swimming in the same water, like that they are also subject to racist and transphobic and ableist, et cetera, ideas about what counts as good sex. But there's a lot more variety in the market that actually exists than what established directors and producers think.
I mean, it's the same dynamic in the film industry, right? No one's going to want to see, and until recently, no one's going to want to watch a superhero movie with an all-black cast, and Black Panther broke every record or whatever. I mean, that was, I think, what held a lot of that back. So that is fascinating, and it's just another reason why the gatekeeping of bosses is, I think, balked at by a lot of these performers and workers. So much of what you write about is through an anti-work lens. Do you mind describing that for our audience as what was a useful analysis for you in looking at porn work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I'll just say that's directly from what performers told me, that this is that work like work itself is the problem. Work sucks. That one of the major draws of porn is that even though it is a job, it feels like clocking in a lot of the time. It is by the hours and sometimes by the kind of nature of the experience less work-like than a lot of jobs. So that's part of it. And where an anti-work lens, which is certainly a Marxist lens, but which differs from some other forms of Marxist thought, kind of departs, is to say that is to acknowledge that like most working people don't like being workers, which seems so obvious. But if you look at a lot of the narratives that are popular in the labor movement, it's the narratives around the dignity of work. It's this kind of call for an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. And sometimes you have to make those kind of narrative compromises, like when you're lobbying for Fight for 15, like, sure, you want to show someone who's like really dedicated at their job and still can't pay their rent. But if you want to be honest about how like most people talk about their jobs, it's that they hate their boss and they want to do as little work as possible. And so an anti-work lens would like begin with that perspective and then say, yeah, of course, people need better conditions, they need better pay. But at the end of the day, slightly better conditions, slightly more worker-friendly labor law, $15 an hour instead of 11 isn't going to make work okay.
When talking to these workers through that lens, was there any kind of self-censorship to a degree? Because I think it's really hard for, based on our social conditioning, to have an anti-work perspective without judgment on oneself or on others. Mm-hmm. Was that an obstacle?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about doing ethnography with sex workers is that that's a community that is so heavily stigmatized that a lot of the kind of respectability politics that govern how other workers feel compelled to talk about their jobs don't even apply, because it's like you're already a pariah. You may as well be honest about hating clocking in. And so that's obviously not true for everyone. And, especially as campaigns for broader sex work decriminalization, for example, pick up, like some people are making appeals for recognition based on the idea that they are helping professionals or that it's a kind of care work, stuff like that. So it's not that you're totally free of it, but a lot of people think, yeah, I'm already a porn star, so may as well be honest about the draw there. So yeah, I didn't find that many people self-censor around that. There are, of course, plenty of porn workers who don't have leftist politics, who embrace the kind of entrepreneurialism, and again, as we were talking about before, who are themselves management and so have a kind of class interests against acknowledging that work sucks and that everyone hates their boss because they're a boss too. But I think it was less around the kind of stigma.
Yeah, and the fluidity of roles within the industry was another just like fascinating dynamic. Lastly, there's a part of your book where you say the porn industry, as has been traditionally understood, does not exist. Mm-hmm. I guess that could be a good way to wrap things up here. Sure. What did you mean by that? And I guess how does it shatter the understanding about the porn industry writ large? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I mean by that is, and that's I suppose me particularly taking a swipe at anti-porn thinkers, but also people who celebrate the medium, who suggest that like we can say the porn industry and that know what that means. So in terms of how that responds to anti-porn feminist ideas, there are a couple of things. One is to say that it is impossible to make any kind of coherent generalization about what porn looks like. There is not an industry producing a certain set of images that say a certain kind of message about heterosexual sex, for example. It's simply that's not I'm not saying that because I want that to be true, or like it just doesn't exist. There is instead a diffuse and messy and disorganized non-community of people all over the country and all over the world who are producing scenes, according to hegemonic tastes and algorithmic rules. But there's sometimes you would read the kind of critiques of the industry and imagine that there's like a room of guys deciding like what to distribute, and it's just not true. So that's part of it. But then for working conditions, it also means, and so this has a lot of positives, but also a lot of limitations, that like there's no coherent community of performers either who could organize as people who know each other, who regularly work together, who are organizing against a known management enemy. Like none of that exists anymore. So what that means for the future of labor organizing in the industry is, it brings up a set of questions that require, say, mainstream labor activists to ask totally different questions than they would of an industry that is actually an industry. So I think those are the main takeaways there.
Lastly, I know I said that was the last question, but we had someone write in and I was hoping that you could respond. Chris Burdick wrote in saying, "Great guest today, Emma. 2 quick comments. It seems to me that if you scratch an anti-porn feminist, you find a turf underneath. On Twitter anyway, I've noticed a lot of crossover between the anti-porn crowd and the anti-trans crowd.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's some organizing news regarding sex workers right here in my neighborhood, North Hollywood.
Yeah.
An establishment called Star Gardens is poised to become the first unionized strip club in the country, which means we may be giving you guys some competition soon for the title of Heartland of America. That's a joke about the show. But I guess the first part there too, right? The turf overlap with and being an anti-porn feminist, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think the only thing that I'll add about that is just to talk about how wild it is that these feminists still call themselves radicals when their politics are lining up with the most urgent priorities of the reactionary right. And so, yes, that is right. I almost have little to say because it's just true that like these people are the same. They have some of the most conservative gender and sexual politics you can imagine, politics that I think the overlap of anti-sex worker animus and turfism show us that both of these things are connected to SWERF and TERFs, as anti-sex worker feminists and anti-trans feminists, their own commitments to their class privilege, to their whiteness, and to a kind of version of cisgender womanhood that is absolutely conservative and exclusionary, and that also like requires making enemy women, whether those be trans women, sex workers, and obviously a lot of overlap there, to kind of maintain that status of womanhood. So the fact that we're even like using the language of feminism to describe that is so wild to me.
It is. I'll never understand why someone needs their womanhood defined in this special category by being exclusionary. It's like, it's just it's very bizarre. But
yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, like middle class white women have always done this. So like that, and often this is counterposed against Black womanhood, which is wrapped up in turfism historically and anti-sex worker thought. So, I mean, that part's not new. I think the sense that transness is a kind of emergent crisis that needs managing by this unholy combination of feminists and right wingers is I think particular to this moment.
Heather Berg, professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies at Washington University in St. Louis, and author of Porn Work, Sex Labor, and Late Capitalism. Thanks so much for your time today and great discussion. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, folks, with that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of the program and head into the fun half. We'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs, But first, Matt, what is happening over on Left Reckoning?
Lillian Chichurkia of What's Left of Philosophy podcast on to talk about abortion and so comparative to, let's say, reproductive justice fights in Germany and Spain, and also just kind of assessing the failure to protect abortion rights in America. And did some other fun stuff too. We went really deep into student loans and how this $10,000 for people under $125,000 income it's just kicking the can down the road. Like, it's not seriously addressing the massive issue. And at a certain point, basically, we need to decide that these are grants, as Larry Summers accidentally tweeted. Like, these aren't grants. These are like we've got into the history of it. I don't want to get into it now in the plug, but patreon.com/leftreckoning if you want to hear that.
And let's talk a bit about student loans in the fun half for sure, since that is... has Biden made his announcement yet, Bradley? Do we know?
I think they did, right?
Give me 1 second.
It's that.
I mean, the New York Times got like the scoop and it's been trickling out, but he's scheduled to make a comment today, and I want to see what he officially says. But
yeah, I think the up in the air thing seems to be if it's going to extend to grad loan debt or not, and I think maybe it might. But I mean, that's a small. I mean, they should absolutely extend it to graduate loan debt, but that's a small concession.
He did unveil the plan on Twitter. Like, he put a graphic up of what the forgiveness and repayment, payment based on income plans are. I just don't know. I don't believe he's actually had a public comment yet.
Well, let's pull that, and then we'll talk a bit about that in the fun half. 646-257-3920. See you there.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomiki.
You did it.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry.
Stop talking for a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7-8?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say. 857-210-35-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Back.
We are back. We are back on the Majority Report. Bit of breaking news here. Biden is announcing student loan debt relief today, and it is what he said he would do, the bare minimum. Unfortunately, it is means tested, which
which is actually not what he said he would do either. He said it would be for everybody, so that's a broken promise.
Yes. So the amount is his campaign promise, is it not, Matt? Or did he go lower?
No, he said so like the campaign was always like, we're going to do $10,000 for everyone, and we're going to have
10.
Our legal minds like take a magnifying glass out and scour the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights to see if he can do it. Of course he could do it. If he can do this 10,000 means tested thing, he could do 50,000. He could do more. And they just decided that they can do basically the absolute bare amount. I mean, this is like, it's sort of like, the $2,000 checks thing. And then it's like, well, we're going to give you the bare amount of money that can make it seem like that promise was kind of kept.
It is, yeah, right, exactly. And it is, means testing is always a way to shoot yourself in the foot. But from their perspective, they are terrified of suburban conservative voters who don't like Trump and might be more inclined to vote Democrat in the fall, feeling like, well, this is unfair. They're giving handouts to rich kids. So they've capped it at income at $125,000 a year, which, hopefully it does help some people. But the whole point, really, of student debt as a disciplinary tool is to funnel folks into industries that might be better suited to serve capitalists. Say you're going to law school and you have a lot of student debt, you're maybe less inclined to be a public defender instead of, say, working at a white-collar law firm. Yeah. Or if you're a doctor, you might be working at a big hospital chain, or instead of going to underserved communities. Other graduate degrees, you can copy paste that analysis onto. But let's put up this graphic that Biden put up here. Biden tweeted this out. He has yet to make his formal announcement, but he at least has kind of settled on this after like a year of his legal team deciding if $10,000 was enough. $20,000 if you went to college on Pell Grants, which is, again, the centrist Democrat darling, the kinds of grants that they give out for students that are deserving in their eyes and apply for them. $10,000 of debt cancellation if you did not receive Pell Grants, and it's going to be capped at $125,000. And the moratorium on student loan repayment will be extended one final time. Wow. All right. Exactly. So they made that pretty definitively through the end of the year.
You see who they're speaking to here, right? Like,
yeah.
That point you just read, student loan pause extended one final time. That's why they're doing this. This is a carrot because they're going to whack you with a stick.
And I mean, with repayment starting again, I'm hopeful. Well, maybe hopeful is too strong of a word. I hope that there's a carrot and stick approach here, but that there's a secondary carrot at the end, right? Where hopefully Biden in his remarks today says something like, more could be coming, and this is not the end of it. We could provide more relief if Democrats are able to retain the House and the Senate in the fall. But actually, now that I talk that out, I don't think that's going to happen.
They're not going to do that. No, they want to be done with this until it becomes like even more of a larger debt bubble. And because this doesn't address the problem either. Like there's this Color of Change poll, 84% of black voters support student loan debt elimination. Poll results reveal more than half of black voters, 56, have held or are currently holding student loan debt. 84% support a full or partial elimination of debt, with 2/3 indicating they strongly support eliminating the debt. 9 in 10 Black women support partial. But this is actually the important part. 40% of Black voters indicated they want Biden-Harris administration to ensure that any student admitted into a public college can graduate without taking on student loans. There's nothing about that. We've not talked about what we're going to do this at all. It's just going to be more kids taking out loans for this stuff. It just needs
because
to
they want that, right, Matt?
Exactly.
Like that is it's not the bug, it is the feature. Student loan debt is a way, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure that a certain class of young person doesn't get a little bit too confused about what their role is in the labor market. If you go to college, you are here to serve the capitalist class. We want you to be an upper middle class professional. We want you in the professional managerial sector, and let's go, right? And this is the privilege that we are affording to you by giving you, by saddling you with debt, and we're not going to give much in terms of repayment, or I should say forgiveness.
There shouldn't be this. Basically, like the long thing we talked about on Left Reckoning last night was, how did this student loan system come into being? Well, if you look back in 1957, Sputnik happens. We're all freaked out because the Russians are crushing us in terms of like scientists and stuff like that. So Eisenhower feels like this is embarrassing to us. The new Senate Majority Leader Lyndon Baines Johnson is ready for to act on that. But the problem is, Eisenhower wants small government. And so how are we going to do this? Well, we beat around the bush for a while. And also, what also happens after Sputnik is there's a lot of red scare going on. So people are really freaked out about communism. So they don't want socialism. So what happens in like 1965 is LBJ's in charge. And there's this Alabama Democrat who wanted to do basically a universal higher ed, which is what we need to do, which is what Bernie Sanders wanted to do. But the liberals, anti-communist liberals and Republicans were against that. So instead we passed like the National Defense Education Act, I think it was called. And that was, let me back up. And we didn't just want to give LBJ, despite all these Great Society programs, we didn't just want to give the student loans out to folks because that would make the national debt look bad, particularly at a time when we're bombing Vietnam and need all those funds to go there. So we work with bankers and say, hey, bankers, we got an easy government adjacent, finance deal we can work out with you, where all you can take the profits for servicing these student loan debts. And like that's why we're here now. But fundamentally, we just need to go back to the point where we are just paying for this stuff instead of making giant bubbles through finance on it, because finance cannot it can only ever be profitable if it goes after the wealthy kids. When you have to extend education to everybody who isn't a rich kid, it's not a profitable business. And you look at the way colleges have been dealing with, say, scholarships for our entire lives. If you have $50,000 worth of scholarship to give away, are you going to give that to one kid who otherwise couldn't afford any of that tuition for a full ride? Or would you give it to 10 richer kids who are going to be able to make up that $40,000 later down the line? So it's a racist system. It's a horrible system. And also, the price for the universal public higher ed, which is the solution to this mess, where kids can go to their public universities and not come out in debt, is just like Bernie Sanders proposed. These taxes on speculation, which are percentages of percentages, or like tenths of percentages, hundreds of percentages on just speculative activity on like bond trading and stuff like that. And we could do that and actually address this problem instead of, can anybody argue that this is anything other than kicking the can down the road?
You can't, right. You can't argue anything other than that. And I think it sets up, because it's means tested, a variety of bureaucratic messes. Like, what tax filing is this based on? Again, we don't really know right now. It seems like a formal announcement from Biden is coming in an hour or so. But like, if you just made it universal, there would not be all of this tax data that would create messes like it did with the COVID relief payments for people. So I don't know. Someone wrote in here, so far so good. This is a mess. A few things come to mind. One, a 125K salary based on what year? This is the point I just made. Then we won't see forgiveness until after taxes are filed this year. And repayment starting Jan 1 would not be based on a lower student loan balance. Salary based on, or number 2, salary based on a prior year. What if someone lost a job? Exactly. 3, my Fed loan, a huge student loan servicer, is transitioning out by the end of this year. There's bound to be a huge bureaucratic mess as all borrowers like me are serviced by my Fed loan are transitioned to a new servicer. And then they want to throw in means tested forgiveness. What a mess. It's just they make things harder on themselves. I always return to during COVID, Nancy Pelosi was adamant. We are not temporarily expanding Medicare. We are not going to do it because of, and she didn't say this publicly, but because of what that means. When you have a crack in the door, then people are going to say, well, why couldn't Medicare be expanded all the time for everybody? In fact, why couldn't we have Medicare for all? And they're doing the same thing here with the means testing of student loan repayment or student loan debt relief. Because if you do it as a universal program, then people start asking questions. Same thing with the Medicare expansion potential during COVID. We're going to do it through COBRA, and it's going to be 4 times more expensive, even though we say we care about things being cost effective in Congress. Yeah. It's also going to be a bureaucratic mess, and it's going to piss everybody off. Obamacare is another good example of this. And it won't actually pay dividends for us electorally, but that's not necessarily our primary goal.
Yeah.
We want to give enough so that we maintain power, but if we don't, that's the trade-off, because the scarier thing is having these programs be universal and taxes be raised on the wealthy and corporations to pay for it. So I'm happy that some people will get some relief, and that's good. But this is the bare minimum, and it's actually less than what he promised on the campaign trail.
And this is like the Democrats, like when they say access to healthcare or access to education or access to a home, what they mean is we're going to bring in a banker buddy who's going to take a nice cut of that, and that's how you're going to get access to it. You can finance it, which again means a claim on your future labor instead of just granting these things as public goods, which they should be. And I mean, yeah, this is a fail. This is a failure. And I'm not interested. Like, of course, it's better than the fucking Republicans. Like, great. But this is a failure in policymaking, just objectively speaking, in a debt crisis and where everyone's looking around like, why aren't people having families and all this stuff? It's not a mystery. It's intentional policy, and they know this. Like this stuff isn't lost on people like Larry Summers or even Joe Biden. Like they understand the function that debt has in making labor more pliable.
Did we call into the phones, guys?
Let me go do that.
Baratumi, really pretty rich hearing complaints about Biden. You guys are really starting to struggle. What does that mean? Dancing eel roll. Fox is already calling debt cancellation as handouts. Want to wager how long they start complaining that it should be taxable canceled debt? Yes, certain canceled debts are considered taxable in some cases. See IRS topic 431. Kick the can, comma Jack. Thank you. Thanks for showing us what's possible, but not actually doing it, Biden. Woke fetus. Also, the government calculates the amount of money you will pay back over your lifetime based on the assumption that your wages increase over time, which is total nonsense, especially now.
Can I just address, I don't know if we're still on the student loan thing, but Joe Lynn says, can these elitist commenters fathom how important $20,000 is to me? Absolutely. I think that, like I said, like this stuff is good, but it is not addressing the actual problem. You on an individual level, that'd be good. Probably $50,000 would have been even better for you. There's no reason that this couldn't be $50,000. It's just a choice. So can you fathom how much better 50 would be for you than 20? Like fathom that.
It's actually quite a simple argument, guys. We want more, and this was the bare minimum.
This
and
isn't
less
a place
than what he promised, the most conservative Democrat running.
Exactly. Like this isn't a place where we applaud scraps, and scraps can be really good sometimes. But you have to acknowledge that that's what you're getting. And when you look at the actual policy, which is like putting entire generations into debt bondage, this one-time loan forgiveness is jack shit. Like the interest is going to build up for a lot of those. Like more kids are going and signing these student loan things now. Like, I mean, of course you should be happy to get it. I'm happy to get it, right? It's great. I'm glad that my student loans are less. It's not. That is a very narrow view to like judge public policy through.
Yeah. Woke fetus, I wish they would lower the pay period for public service loan forgiveness from 10 to 5 years. That would be helpful. Do DeVos's changes to the loans too. Grad Plus loans require AAA credit, which I doubt any grad students has. And if you ever had loans forgiven to disability, you have to get a doctor's note every year that you are fit to work. Oh, Jesus. If you don't, no new loans, and then they unforgive any loans forgiven due to disability. Like, how much more evidence do you guys, does whoever wrote in need that they're trying to make this as difficult to do as possible?
I mean, just look at the PPP stuff, right? Like all these people, all these corporations got just giant loans. And
that they didn't have to repay based
on
like
more than $10,000 effing dollars. I mean, I can't understand people who would greet this with like, I mean, this should have been in the bag when Biden won the election. Like this shouldn't be a further cause for celebration here.
Yes, someone said this on Twitter, but they were responding because like Charles C.W. Cook in the National Review wrote this like obviously like frothing at the mouth, flop sweaty column about how, you know, this is going to be on the backs of all, you know, all impoverished people and things like that. Only the rich are going to benefit from debt relief. And someone said like, oh, so this is the time that you're concerned about rich people getting handouts or getting subsidies from the government, as if there aren't 500 other examples.
And it's total BS too, right?
Oh,
like
of course.
They're just trying, and it's amazing that they cloak themselves in that when in the rest of their politics are centered around like shut up about that.
Our very own Jack Crosby in the AM Quickie either yesterday or today mentioned that I know obviously this isn't enough, but something to be good, something good to take away from the 10K is that for a solid, for some percentage of folks, that's almost the entirety of their debt. So obviously it's not enough, but to say that this is only going to benefit like plutocrats and nepotism babies is nonsense.
No, yeah, this is what he's doing now is absolutely going to people who have rich people don't have student loan debt. Like that isn't a thing that exists. And also, first of all, it's not just college graduates that have student loan debt either. A lot of people who went to college and realized that, oh crap, this is going to be too expensive, but I'm still on the hook for what I've already paid for, or for whatever reason in life weren't able to finish, they still have student loan debt. That should be forgiven. And that stuff is going to help a lot of people. A lot of people are going to have a good chunk of their debt wiped out. But again, like, unless you start talking about public higher education, like Bernie Sanders, like this is just a kick of the can down the road.
And by the way, the funding for College for All in this country is one of the cheapest programs that we could implement immediately. People, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they'll be shocked. I believe that the Bernie Sanders proposal, it's under $100 billion a year. If you could fact check that for me, Bradley, that'd be great. But that is nothing in terms of federal government spending. And they could do that tomorrow, but they choose not to because they like this as a disciplinary tool. And the federal government is the #1 lender when it comes to student loans. it also benefits them.
Bernie, I'm not sure of the total price tag, but in terms of paying for a free college bill, Tax on Wall Street Speculation Act will levy a 0.5% tax on stock trades. 0.5%. What a communist. 0.5% on tax on stock trades, a 0.1% fee on bond trades, and a 0.005% fee on derivative transactions. Look at this, Joseph Stahl, and that would raise up to $2.4 trillion over the next decade. And so, I mean, that's what stands in the way. Not some tax on lower middle class people who didn't go to college. Which, by the way, let's talk about that. I think it would be smart if we had like a party who wasn't like capitalist. If we didn't have two parties that were capitalist, but like actually a workers' party, to bundle in student loan debt relief with, say, like the loans that truckers have to take out, particularly at a time where we have different difficulty with infrastructures, loans for cab drivers. There's different sorts of debt traps because America is designed for such things. Different sort of debt traps that working people go into to make a living, and all of those things should be addressed, I think, by the government. And also, if you really want to do something for people who don't finish college, like Medicare for all.
Yeah.
What are you going to do bigger? You got something bigger than that? What, like you're gonna interrogate Fauci? Like, okay.
Emma's adequate microphone writes in, squirt gun on a burning building. Yeah, this sounds good, right, guys? I found this in my closet, and then I realized I could definitely make this work. So I'm hoping it sounds better. I did test negative this morning, but I'm trying to be super cautious about getting anybody sick. So we'll see about tomorrow. But I just wanted to make sure. I mean, if this sounds good, guys, like that's a good option, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, good. All right, let's take a call, and then we'll get into some clips.
Oh, I just have to make a quick note. I've seen a lot of people, including the serfs, post a thing about Ben Shapiro getting a PPP loan, and I don't think that's the right Ben Shapiro.
Oh, I am undoing my retweet.
I think there is another person named Ben Shapiro. The Daily Caller News Foundation one is real. There's other ones that are real. The Louder with Crowder one is real, but I don't think I think that's a different Ben Shapiro. There's a lot of people named Ben Shapiro. There's a guy I worked for at Vice named Ben Shapiro, and to this day, my dad sometimes will come across a Ben Shapiro post, the bad Ben Shapiro post, and ask me if this is the guy I worked for, and I said no, that's just some asshole. But yeah, I don't think people are right about Ben Shapiro taking PPP.
All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It is the finally liberated from his student loan debt, Kowalski from Nebraska.
Well, that's good.
Crazy to Dark Biden or Dark Brandon. For my liberation. Yes.
Let's get that right. What's on your mind, Kowalski?
Yeah.
Congrats, though. That's good news. See, it will affect people, but it needs to be more. That's the thing.
It's good and bad. The issue I have with it is that I am not much for like the whole individualist like viewpoint. The millennial class in of itself needs to be freed of this burden so it can start purchasing housing, because as boomers begin to retire, millennials still will not have the leverage in order to purchase housing, and instead it's going to be bought up by places like BlackRock, which means we're going to be stuck in a perpetual rent crisis until we're dead. So unfortunately, I think this is going to disincentivize a lot of people. And I mean, like, this had a lot of broad support, particularly amongst working class people. And I mean, for people who go into like the business degrees and it's only a bachelor's degree, like you can probably pull that off with only taking out $15,000, $20,000 in student loans, which, you know, you amortize that out over a 20, 30-year period. It's not that big of a burden. But the fact is that this just eliminated all of those people from really wanting to see this, you know, come to an end, which is not good. That and just education in general, like I don't understand why it's not free. High school is free, and then the people who go straight into work, they had a free education until they entered the workforce. Just because some people are going to get more refined skills doesn't mean that their education shouldn't be free. If anything, you would want that to be the case, because how many Einsteins have been trapped in poverty and couldn't escape to, go get their degrees?
Yeah.
Like, this is just kneecapping our own systems. Not to mention, we have a shortage of teachers, a shortage of nurses, and these are the two most common people you will come into contact in your daily life that have college degrees. And I just know this because I get these shares from all the people that are in my daily life, from like PPUSA garbage, and it's like, how many times have these blue-haired warriors who only make $30,000 a year turn their noses and look down on us working-class folk who make 80 grand a year? It's like, that never happens, ever.
Yeah.
Like, at no point has a teacher or a nurse that I'm aware of ever looked at, like, the construction worker parent or, whomever and be like, well, I mean, you're just an idiot. Like, that doesn't happen. That's not the case. We're all workers at the end of the day. And it's just the corporate aspect of this, too. I'm beginning to notice it more. But, yeah, like, glad it happened to a certain extent, but at the same time, this is probably going to do more harm than good. So that's the farmer view on it, I suppose.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your perspective, Kowalski. I'm glad, though, that at least some of your deck got canceled, even though, again, from a policy perspective, this is such a mess.
But actually, like what Griscom talked about last night, like I've worked my entire college career,
Yep.
Still put in 40 hours a week working in order to pay for that. Like, that was not only uncomfortable, but I have no doubt actually hampered my ability to study and learn and, actually enjoy the time. And I mean, that kind of stuff should not be forced upon people who should just, be focusing on their academics.
Absolutely.
It's an unnecessary burden. And I mean, not everybody can do it. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position because of where I live and like the life connections that I've made. It was doable, but that's not the case for everybody, and it's not fair. And frankly, we have more than enough money and resources to make sure that doesn't have to happen.
That's exactly right. I mean, that is a huge a class distinguisher. Like, if you had to work through college or if you don't, and that's really why the right and sort of corporate interests on the center are against extending college as if it was another high school, because to them high school is a period of time where theoretically, like, don't have to serve a capitalist, although of course a lot of people like us who had to work in high school, but if you extend the higher education to a point where you don't have to work different jobs through college, that strengthens the position of the laborers that are still in the workforce, right? Like, they're not having to compete with people who need a part-time job at Starbucks, for instance. So I mean, that there's a reason. We understand why we've decided to make kids work through colleges, because capitalists like the college kids serving them.
Appreciate it, Kowalski.
All right, you all have a good one. Bye.
You too. All right, let's do this. Have a little bit of fun. Do this Andrew Tate thing. So Andrew Tate is a streamer who was fairly quickly banned from most social media apps because of his insane misogyny. It was an interesting case because I think he exploded. He was really popular on TikTok, was all over the place, and then he was really quickly banned once people realized he said, women should not leave the home. They're a man's property. They shouldn't be able to drive because they're so bad at it, which, was like, is basically based on his own personal experience, and blamed rape victims, said that they had responsibility for what happened to them. I mean, said that, like, if a woman cheats on you, you should assault them. There was a machete involved. Like, it's as extreme as it gets. But he was really popular.
And per Nikki McCann Ramirez at Rolling Stone, in videos posted online, Tate says he moved to Romania partially due to the relatively lax law enforcement around sexual assault and continued to run his businesses from there.
I mean,
there's like a raid with regards to like some sort of thing going on over there too. So like, I mean, in April this year, Tate's home in Romania, this is from the Daily Beast, was raided in connection with a human trafficking investigation following reports of an American woman being abducted. In a YouTube video, Tate said 40% of the reason he moved to the Eastern European country was because Romanian police were less likely to pursue sexual assault allegations.
So he's incredibly explicit about it.
Yeah, like really pulling no punches.
And yeah, who he is he was a kickboxer that went on Big Brother.
Yeah.
That's where this initial sort of kernel of publicity came from.
But he presented himself as a self-help guru, and there, particularly in male self-help, and also with like, I don't know, some of these martial arts influencers post their career. Andrew Tate isn't included in this. Joe Rogan, others as well, who traffic in performing traditional masculinity. They develop that audience and then they feed them reactionary content. This is a budding industry. And luckily, I am grateful that this psycho was deplatformed on most social media apps. But at the same time, he's still getting his message out there, and I'm sure he'll just have it a bit more tailored for really far right wingers on, other platforms.
Incels.
Right. And so here he is, though, speaking out after he got kicked off of a bunch of these platforms in an interview, talking about, more misogynistic nonsense.
People say, well, don't have Tate as a real male role model. There's better ones. Where are they? There are no other male role models. Because to inspire the youth of men.
Oh, I guess pause it for a second. Like, I guess this isn't an interview, so this is just his content now, right?
Yeah, so because he was banned from literally every like major social media platform, I think he just like recorded this video and put it on a website or something. Like, this is just him basically, giving his rebuttal to his being deplatformed.
It is literally anybody else is the answer to your question, Andrew Tate. Literally, almost anybody else would be a better male role model when you're asking this question.
I mean, first of all,
like Hassan, who bodied you in your Twitch debate with him. That would be somebody off the top of my head.
Or like a famous athlete or something. Who is Andrew? Like, I'm sorry, I don't know who this Andrew Tate guy is, but apart from a bunch of like, teenage reactionary little boys. Post his shit all over TikTok all the time. Like this, like I mean, LeBron. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade.
Yes,
in terms of
literally.
being a father, I think that's a much better role model. Like there are a lot of them.
Who else is such a maniacal question?
Yeah, some like brain damaged kickboxer who was on Big Brother, another show that like I don't who people watch that still.
Yeah,
I think we can find others, Andrew. Like I think we'll just be just fine.
There's actually quite literally billions of other men in the world who would be more suited for the role model position than you. But like, here you go. Just rampant narcissism. Let's continue.
People say, well, don't have Tate as a real male role model. There's better ones. Where are they? There are no other male role models. Because to inspire the youth of men, you need to be aspirational. They have to look at you and want to be like you. And there's no other male role models that have had the tenacity or the aggressiveness to have such a fantastic life as I have. That they're going to listen to me. They listen to me because of my authority, and my authority comes from my life experience.
Oh, this is going to crash.
If my mentality is so long, how have I managed to amass enormous wealth? How have I managed to amass huge social status? How have I managed to physically dominate?
Oh my God.
I've done things that men respect.
The B-roll.
So that's why I can lead them. And I understand my messaging should change in light of the fact that I can be taken out of context. But me being alive on the internet will allow me to lead men in a very positive direction. Banning me and deleting me leaves a black hole where they say there'll be another masculine leader But the men don't listen. The youth of today won't listen to anybody else. That's the reason I'm the most famous man on the planet, because none of these other people have the authority to affect them like I do. It's me or nobody. And
I would love, like, you know, whenever Andrew Tate departs from this earth, someone needs to study that guy's brain for scientific purposes.
The most what do you say? The most famous man in the world, dude.
This guy's like Louis the 14th. Like, he's like he's like, I am the sun. Like the world does not move unless I do.
Like, yeah. Let's check in 5 years, Andrew. Like I don't think it's gonna. I mean, okay. So I also want to play this. So this is the first time I heard of Andrew Tate. He got ambushed. I think I'm not sure exactly the full circumstances of how Hassan got into debate with him. And by the way, that's muted, Bradley. This is a debate he had where, just to set this up a little bit, they're talking about women drivers. And Andrew Tate is convinced that women are bad drivers because he's apparently like been in accidents with women. I'll also say those women were in accidents with Andrew Tate. So I don't know, maybe it's not women, but the Andrew Tate that's a bad driver. And who knows about this? But Hassan is making a point about about biases and data versus sort of anecdotal sort of information that might be sort of biased and maybe a misogynistic way, for instance. And I mean, I'll just say, like, I'm not impressed by Andrew Tate. I think he's a dime a dozen, like, intellectually. And I think this sort of exchange shows it here.
You could just really quickly, like, the B-roll that he showed in that proof that he was the ultimate masculine messiah. It's like every guy in Miami that wants to get Insta famous. I mean, he's no more interesting or famous than the contestants on The Bachelor, and there's like 25 of them this season. That they think that if they can rent a Lamborghini from down the road and take a photo shoot in it, and because they've had sex a few times, that means that he's the only person who can lead men. Man,
right?
A lot of people fit that criteria, buddy.
He's an influencer. Like, he's literally a glorified influencer. Like,
and he's just Jordan Peterson, but that he's decided that he's going to groom himself to look the part of the masculine person that he wants to aspire to.
Well, he's male chauvinist Ty Lopez. I don't know if you guys remember Ty Lopez, but Ty Lopez is this guy who used to do all these like sort of grind set videos, which is like, you need to read, you know how I'm driving this Lamborghini? Because I read 7 books a day. And
well, that's what I'm saying. It's like the reactionary, it's not too far to get to reactionary politics from self-help male influencers. It's
exactly, which is why, I mean, Tate's been pictured with Jordan Peterson's daughter. So
it's not society that's alienated you. It's not, you know, the fact that that capitalism has completely sapped people's meaning for life. It is the fact that you don't grind enough, and it's an individualistic moral failing if you don't do it and you don't get the girls that you should. Like, so yeah, incel influencer types, but I want to see, because honestly, Matt, you've mentioned this clip to me a few times, and now we get to actually experience it, which I'm very excited about.
I mean, this whole thing's funny. It's from Hasanabi Productions. Hasanabi debates Andrew Tate and makes him cry. Here's this.
And just to be clear, for the 2 young lads there, they are literally like his mods and handlers, basically. The 2 guys up top on the screen.
Yeah, so I get representation of his fan base.
That is not how you can conduct an appropriate debate.
Good. So now you're saying the thing I just said. I have my own biases, my personal experiences, and I say them. Some people disagree and some people agree, and I don't care. You now come along.
But you're still wrong, though, because I'm not operating on biases when I talk about women driving. I'm talking about the empirical evidence. I might have personally thought women are worse at driving than men as well. But once you arrive at, once you look at the evidence and you realize that said evidence suggests something else, you're probably not going to continue to believe.
I know that it's about to get really funny, but I feel like it's super common knowledge that, particularly for young men, maybe it's because they haven't watched enough Andrew Tate and they've been led astray, but particularly for young men, there's a reason that insurance rates are higher for young male drivers versus young female drivers. And that's because they get into accidents more frequently and statistical. Oh, right. That too.
I sure it's not wokeness?
Yeah, Emma. Hey, Emma. Wait, sorry, but I feel like you gotta listen to the guy. He has been in more accidents. With women.
You're right. Honestly, I'm an emotional woman, and it's probably clouding my judgment. So
this is a little hysterical.
Perhaps I have my period and I'm not remembering the statistics accurately, but I should be fair and listen to his analysis.
You've overlooked that Geico. They say it's just because men are worse drivers, but actually it's a privilege tax. So.
Gotcha.
The prior thing that you believed, right?
We went over the same point like 5 times, and I think we're just.
I know, but it's just weird because I can't I can't break through Andrew's.
I understand your point. You're saying that even if I thought
we're losing the girl.
No, exactly. I want to talk to her. He's saying even if I thought women were worse drivers, I've seen empirical evidence, and I'm so smart that I ignore my own eyes and ears and believe what the internet tells me. That's what he's coming along.
That's not what I'm asking you to do, my friend.
I'm sure you're double vaccinated. It all makes sense to me now. You believe what you're told to believe. You don't believe your own eyes. You don't believe your own ears. And that's why you're going to sit here and talk about empirical evidence that you found on Google. Cool. If you believe everything that's on Google, that is your prerogative, my friend. And if you think that makes you sound smart in the modern world after the 3 years you've just been through, to say that I read a piece of paper that tells me to believe X, so I believe X, and I ignore my own personal experiences. And you think
I'm not asking you to ignore your own personal experiences. I'm simply asking you to look at the data.
So let's change the subject because you've just proven your point.
Okay, Andrew, do you believe? Well, I didn't. You didn't really prove anything, but it's cool. Do you believe the Earth is flat? Or do you believe the Earth is spherical?
So at this point,
dang.
While Bradley deals with that ad, at this point, Andrew Tate has removed his headphones and is smoking a cigar.
He's just, I'm not listening to you anymore. And here, let me put this phallic object in my mouth.
I mean, talk about psychological coping. Maybe we can have Dr. Jordan Peterson say well, actually, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar and doesn't denote anything.
Do you believe the Earth is flat, or do you believe the Earth is spherical, round?
You can skip ahead a little bit, maybe, Brad.
2 years. Aldi has his headphones on.
Yeah, he took his headphones off?
He gets very stressed sometimes, and
Yeah, it's cool. It's important. You know, sometimes you can't take the heat. Sometimes you can't take the heat, so you gotta get out of the kitchen a little bit. Andrew, do you believe the Earth is flat or round, spherical, globe?
Round.
You believe it's round, right? But when you walk outside, it feels like it's flat.
Brother, and I
it looks flat, it feels flat, but you believe it's round. Why do you believe the Earth is round?
Because I have personal experience that would prove to me that the Earth.
Oh, you have personal experience. What happened? Did you go up to the fucking moon? Is that how you figured it out?
Exactly. I flew up into space and I looked down on Earth. And I saw a big circle.
That's crazy. Okay, you don't have to. Hey, listen, you don't have to concede on that point, but I think you and I both understand the importance of scientific, the importance of empirical evidence in that one, right? Or
all our fun.
Science.
And I saw him there, and I thought, wow, this guy, okay, he's gonna ruin the stream. We had a hot chick. Now you're here.
Is that what you thought?
Just chill out. Like,
it's a little. So what's up? Is it a little bit more difficult when I'm not like the traditional SJW looking person? Is that why it feels like the stream is a little bit more ruined?
No, it's not difficult. As a professional, I'll tell you the conversation we just had.
Yeah, dude, you've been kicked in the face and stuff. Like, I'm sure you can handle little old me.
Exactly. So I'll tell you as a professional the conversation we just had. I said I am biased and I don't believe women can drive. That's my personal experience. I don't care if anyone agrees. You came along and said, don't interrupt me. You came along and said, no, that's not true because of the evidence. I came and said, I don't care about the evidence, my personal experience. You said, I also have personal experiences and we're all biased. I agreed. Then you said, even if I had personal experiences that said X, I would ignore them because the internet told me to believe Y. I believe what I am told.
That's not what I said. I said that regardless of my own personal biases that I might have, evidence is still more important than my personal biases.
When you guys are all talking at once,
and it's boring, and you've lost, and it's boring. So let's just move on to the subject.
Is that what happens? You just say I'm boring and I lost, and then you win? Is that what it is?
Do a poll in the chat. And if you won, then we'll continue to talk it. But I'm sure you've lost, and it's boring.
Okay.
And it's
do you want me to leave the conversation that desperately,
Pause
Andrew?
it for a sec. Well, I guess we're good there. I guess he wants, the thing is that Andrew Tate wants a poll in the chat because he could use some empirical scientific evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that his personal experience or is that someone else's personal experience?
I personally like. I love his transatlantic accent there, right? Like
Very
he's also
bizarre.
British.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's
You've made it boring.
You made it
The
boring.
girl's gone now.
The girl's gone. The pretty lady's gone.
You're boring. I mean, bro, get therapy, Andrew Tate. Get therapy for your car accidents, bro.
honestly.
Therapy.
Every day that dude wakes up and he has like a sort of, like the what was it, the Grover meme of the Vietnam War flashback.
Yeah, exactly.
He thinks about every car accident that he's ever been in.
Yeah, he sees a woman driving a GMC Envoy, and it's like at the beginning of like Born on the 4th of July when the firecracks are going off.
This is also it's amazing to watch these clips back to back where he's like, there will be no space for any male role models once I'm deplatformed. I'm the most famous person in the world, and it'll be like a black hole. When he's literally in a Foursquare like Twitch debate with Hassan, with his like backup rear guard being like, no offense, like just two literal like scrawny 14-year-olds in their rooms.
Yeah,
who are double fisting energy drinks. Like,
yeah,
this is the reach and the sprawl that he sees for himself as being the most like heralded male mentor in the world.
That's amazing.
Oh my goodness. It's very funny. The full thing is up on Hasanabi Productions.
Yeah. Definitely worth
Check it out.
Yeah.
Calling from an 817 area code. Who's this Ray calling from?
Hey there, this is James from Fort Worth trying again.
James from Fort Worth. Oh yes. I actually didn't even remember your remember that was your area code, but I'm glad I picked up your call because
no
you
echo
had
today, James.
No, everything's good today.
Excellent.
Nice. What's on your mind?
I wanted to call in today, talk about y'all had played a clip of someone from the Grapevine, the city of Grapevine, their school board meeting.
Grapevine Colleyville from yesterday.
Yeah. But there's also another school district right nearby, Keller ISD, that's been in the news about pulling like 41 books from the shelves, like including the Bible. I don't know if y'all have seen anything about that.
I have not.
I think I might have saw a tweet about it. Yeah, but go on.
Yes. Sorry. Wait, that same district that we played yesterday. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Oh no, you're good.
I just remembered.
So that was the big controversy there. But so at the school board meeting that they just held on Monday, they had a majority voted for $50,000 to be added to their own legal defense fee. And this was funded by they had three candidates that just got elected. Were funded by that same Patriot Mobile group, and they all voted for $50,000 to be added to their legal defense fee, and their legal attorney guy or whatever is one of the district board members' friends, and he's also funded by Patriot Mobile.
So it's essentially just an authorization of a slush fund that benefits them.
Yes, and also the big stipulation is it's at least $50,000, so it can be more.
And there's no cap?
No, there's nothing about a cap in what they released.
So this whole Patriot Mobile group, basically they had flooded the district with money. Did you experience what were some of your experiences of seeing that money manifest itself within the context of the school board race?
They got three brand new Patriot Mobile funded candidates to be elected. They replaced three rhinos.
Right.
But it wasn't. It was just all across DFW.
I was seeing all these posters that had been placed all over the area, based on like in God, or they were saying "In God We Trust" or whatever.
Yes, that is the new thing that was also passed by the Texas House. If a public school receives a donation of the "In God We Trust," these signs, if they receive it donated, they have to display it in in a non-innocuous place or something, place of prominence in the school. So good things happening in DFW.
Ugh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for calling back.
Bye.
Insanity. All right, let's do actually from last night, this interview with Jamal Bowman. So last night I was on TYT's election coverage, and Jamal Bowman came on, and he was actually pretty candid about the DCCC, Sean Patrick Maloney, the redistricting, and what it did to undercut progressive members of Congress in New York State. We talked about the New York 10 race, where right now it seems that Dan Goldman, the Levi Strauss heir, who poured millions of dollars into his own campaign, is going to prevail against leftist candidate Yuh-Line Niou. Unfortunately, because the redistricting happened so close to the election, there was a lot of scrambling involved, and there were 3 progressives, including incumbent Mondaire Jones, in New York 10, in that district, because he was forced out of his old district by the DCCC chair. He could have chosen to run there. I wish he did, because I do think that Yuh-Line would have won if that wasn't the case, but it also was a really difficult situation that he was put into. And Jamal Bowman sheds light on that, talking about the redistricting process in New York.
Incredibly important.
Jamal, I'm in New York 10, and I voted for Yuh-Line today, and it was a bit of a bittersweet moment, because I love her candidacy, but to vote not for Mondaire Jones, who was somebody who I was supportive of, back when I was with TYT, and who's somebody who I believe is a strong progressive, that was something that, was hard for me to do, but it was a strategic choice. And I'm just curious about your take generally about the redistricting process, how that was so difficult for you and to navigate in your race, and how it kind of edged out some progressive voices and made a mess of things, and made things difficult, frankly, for a lot of progressive candidates in the state.
Yeah, we completely screwed that up. I mean, we as Democrats, to have a supermajority in the state legislature, to have control of the House of Representatives, and to botch that up the way we did, all because, in my opinion, I think we got greedy with the way we drew the lines, and that greed led to the lines being thrown out by Democratic appointed judges, maybe small d Democrat by name, but not like corporate promo Democrats, but they were Democrats. To have that happen the way it happened was just a travesty. And to have Mondaire, what happened to Mondaire and him having to run in New York 10 was also, it's heartbreaking for me personally. Mondaire is an incredible member of Congress. He's brilliant as a person and in his role as a member of Congress. And he needs to be coming back to Congress. And it's unfortunate that he had to run in a seat, for a seat that's not in his district. And obviously that hurt him. And the way Sean, handled that from the beginning, I mean, he looked at the map for like 20 minutes and was like, I'm running in 17. And that was crazy to me. And then Mondaire had a decision to make. And, it's easy for us to say run against Sean, but, Sean's the DCCC chair and has all the money and power and support in the world. And then on the other side, you got running against me. And it's something I know he didn't want to do. And obviously I didn't want him to do, because I would have hated to have to run against my brother and someone who's another progressive and who's great in Congress. So it's just, we screwed that up, and we need to figure out how to make it right as a party. And again, it's another example of how the party stumbles over itself to figure out how to be a real big tent party. and really represent everyone instead of using progressives as proxy weapons to other progressives.
So I got to do a quick.
Yeah, so that was, I thought, a really a candid response from Jamal Bowman, because he prevailed, and I'm happy that Jamal Bowman is still in Congress, because I think I've said this before. Besides Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of the candidates that I was able to interview before they got into Congress, he was like, those two stood out as just, okay, you're really impressive, you know your stuff, and he's a good guy, and he's a principal for a long period of time and has that way of communication that I think is really effective. But it's unfortunate. Mondaire Jones got screwed. In hindsight, as I say, I do wish that he stayed in the race against the DCCC chair, Maloney. But think about it from his perspective, right? That's a really tough hill to climb. And then he didn't want to run against Mondaire Jones because they didn't want two Black progressives being pitted against each other. From those two guys' perspective, they didn't want that to go down. And so, but frankly, I think that was by design by Sean Patrick Maloney and the DCCC. They were happy for progressives to be pitted against each other. Go on.
Right. Like anything, like any sort of maneuvering that ends up harming progressives, you have to at least suspect that it was intentional.
And so it seems like that was pretty confirmed, at least from Jamal Bowman's point of view there. It's just, we have to be strategic on the left, and the fact that Mondaire Jones ran in New York 10 basically, I think, precluded Yuh-Line Niou from winning that race, and we could have had a really strong representative in my district, so I'm bummed about it. Particularly, she didn't take any real estate money, and right now rents are exploding in New York, and I would have loved to not have the Levi Strauss heir as my representative. I know, Brad, he's ours. He's the three of our. So it's going to be Dan Goldman.
It's such a nightmare. Yikes. I mean, the optimistic take that David had last night is like, this does show that there's a lot of votes out there for progressives. We just got to get Dan Goldman out next time.
Yeah, and I think what we can learn from this, like Matt is saying, is that winning by a plurality like this means that he just simply needs to be matched up against one person. There was about 50% of the vote for Rivera, Niou, Mondaire, Joanne Simon, and Liz Holtzman, who should have never been running in the first place. Those two candidates, they were never going to win. They have and there was just simply not an appetite for their candidacies. So, and just for to the Maloney point, there were a few other candidates, a few other incumbents who chose to run where their district was, as opposed to where their hometown was, as opposed to the majority of their constituency after redistricting. Like Andy Levin did that, unfortunately, when he lost to Haley Stevens in his primary. Vicente Gonzalez did in South Texas, where Mayra Flores won that district, the Republican in South Texas, after about a century of Democrats in that area. But be that as it may, This was mentioned in the primary school newsletter, which you guys should check out for this type of info. Maloney is the DCCC chair. His job, his responsibility, is to literally keep and elect more members of Congress. Mm-hmm. His choice to run in that district made it so that now, because of the shuffling, because of the redistricting, and because of his choices, Mondaire Jones will no longer be a congressperson. Like, that's on him. Because
he wanted a slightly better chance at victory, because the district is more favorable to Democrats.
Exactly.
That's why he did it.
He wanted
a purely selfish choice.
Exactly. The brave leader of the Democratic caucus going into the midterms literally was like, I'd rather not embarrass myself potentially, and sacrifice a member of our own, a young Black gay progressive member of Congress. Also, it's shameful.
Also, every Republican who whines about this, a point made by Oliver Willis, but every Republican that makes whines about You know, the PPP hypocrisy is one thing, but they all voted to cut Bill Gates' fucking taxes. So spare me.
What? Oh, so spare you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought you
like
got cut
I don't
off
want
for a
to like that. The idea that now public money should only go to the please.
Right. Mr. J-Bot, I went to high school in Southlake, the district between Keller and Grapevine, Coleyville, and they're the ones with multiple videos of students using slurs, as well as board members who both sided the Holocaust recently. I remember that story. Jake the teacher, everybody needs to encourage WFPNY to run Yuleen in the general and be transparent about the process. Also, the result in NY19 shows Sean Patrick Maloney would have won had he stayed up there, but he didn't have the courage to take even a little risk. Yep.
I like both of those points a lot. I don't know if Yuleen has the appetite for that, but if she would, I would support it.
And she has the chance because Mondaire would have had the Working Families Party line, and he is abdicating it. So if she does choose to do so, she could mount that. It would be obviously an uphill battle against Goldman and the Democratic machine, but I mean,
but let's
it's up
go.
To her. Yeah, it's up to her.
I mean, I doubt she does it, and I bet she just keeps her powder dry for next term.
And also, speaking of powder dry, I think I've made this point before. Repeat candidacies are not a bad thing. It does not make you a perennial candidate. Marie, I mean, she's had her ethics concerns now, but Marie Newman challenged Dan Lipinski 3 times and won that seat in Illinois.
Corey Bush.
Yeah, Corey Bush won after 2 times fighting against Lacey Clay. Like, it's absolutely possible to keep garnering name recognition, keep yourself in the headlines, and keep that visibility up into the next session. So if this is what she wants to do, it's absolutely a recipe and a formula that has worked before in unseating incumbents.
And her situation is even more favorable than the 2 that you described before, based on the progressive vote splitting that happened here, and also based on the fact that she was an assembly person and her entire assembly district, state assembly district, is contained in this new congressional district.
And Goldman will not be an entrenched incumbent. He will be he will be a freshman congressperson.
And this is one of the most it's Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn included. Yeah, and like, you know, we should have as progressive of a representative as possible.
And I just want to shout out David Alexis again, at David for BK, who was I was hoping he would be able to beat Kevin Parker, but he had a good thread about the actual takeaways for what he says. Last night's results are a mandate for good cause eviction, for building publicly owned renewable energy, for single payer, and for retiring Kevin Parker. I agree with that. So yeah, like you said, it might take a couple of times, but Yuleen is somebody who I would like to see back, but and also David Alexis, at David for BK. Go follow him, folks.
And similar thing, if there wasn't a third candidate in that race, Kevin Parker would not have been nearly as Kevin Parker would have been much more vulnerable, and it's important to keep the pressure on that specific race, because I'm not editorializing here. You can Google him. Kevin Parker is a violent, dangerous man. He's been he has been accused and convicted of multiple things. He punched a traffic officer. He's threatened women colleagues in the state house. He is not a good person, and he's not a good representative for his district. And so I really hope David Alexis runs again.
Tushy's fan says MTG got swatted. What?
Funny.
No way. Glad she finally acknowledges that the militarized police force with a record of shooting first and asking questions later, plus heavily armed civilians who brandish their guns every opportunity they get, create an extraordinary, dangerous world for the rest of us to live in. I mean, that's funny. You shouldn't swat people. I know, for example, Hassan has gotten swatted, and it's really uncool, but
yeah, no, it's not funny. But
it's a little funny in the Marjorie Taylor Greene case.
It's ironic, I guess, is probably the better word for it. The Rome Police Department said Georgia Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene was a victim of swatting attack early Wednesday morning in Floyd County. Police said officers responded to her home around 1 a.m. after somebody reported someone being shot multiple times, but determined the call was a prank. Wow.
Anyway, all right. Matt, when I was out, did you guys play this Republican state representative Neil Collins, like regretting his?
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Sorry, guys. I thought that was a more recent clip. Excuse me.
No, I'm pretty sure we did.
It's all okay. I thought I saw that. I just wanted to make sure before we played it. Let's do this Dennis Prager thing. Here is Dennis Prager on his show. Someone called into his program and asked Dennis about his perspective on the Nazi slogan, church, children, and kitchen. Prager says, just because the Nazis used it doesn't make it bad. Interesting.
Thanks, Mr. Prager. I really want your opinion on the 3 Ks of Imperial Germany and later adopted by Nazi Germany. Do you want me to be specific? I'm sure you know what that means.
Yeah, I do recall Kinder, Kirche, and Küche, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And if you would elaborate on
children, children, church, and Kinder, Kirche, and children, church, and kitchen.
Yes, sir. And, do you think that was a net positive? And also, would you elaborate? Finally, a quick footnote here. I believe we're in the Weimar phase in the United States, equivalent to what I'm going to call the Weimar phase right now.
Yeah, well, you have a very pessimistic view. I don't engage in pessimism or optimism. I don't blame you at all for that view. As long as you fight. I don't care if a person's an optimist, pessimist, or like me, neither.
I agree with this.
Just as long as you fight. So the fact that the Nazis adopted the slogan doesn't make the slogan all that bad. Church, children, and kitchen, they're pretty significant in life. I think it's even better than CEO in a sales department.
Why did he know the original German?
What a high bar. Yeah, maybe he knows German, but those are known as the 3 Ks because they are 3 Ks in a row. Kinder, right? So
yeah, Kinder, Küche, and Kirche.
Yeah, not necessarily a bad thing. Like it feels like the meme of what's his name? Or if it's I think it's Mike Myers. Like, are we the baddies? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I just want to say, like, when they say Kinder, Küche, Kirche, or children, kitchen, church, they're not saying those are good things that we support. They're saying that's the role of women.
Yes.
Like, right? Like,
it's not like saying it's not like cake. Broccoli and trees, all things that we support and we like
and enjoy.
I don't know. It's just the slogan is meant to say this is where women should know their role. So I'm glad Dennis Prager has an understanding, at least even momentarily, that his view aligns well with that of fascists, because conservatives, and we'll play it a little bit later, love to invoke Nazis when they're talking about, I don't know, say, pandemic rules that prevent people from dying en masse, even though we barely did any of that in this country. They love to use Nazis to say that talking about racism in schools is equivalent to, I don't know, the Nazi book burnings. But the true reality of this is that the Nazis were a fascist right-wing political party, and conservatives like Dennis Prager have a lot more in common with Nazis than the left does.
Yeah, fascism is basically hierarchy preservation up to the point of violence. I mean, this case thing, the most suggestive of these is listed in the 2nd volume of German Proverbs Glossary, A Treasury for the German People, published in 1870. 4 Ks are requisite of a pious woman, namely that she keeps regard for church, chamber, kitchen, and children. And there's a few others. The phrase started to appear in its current form in the writing in the early 1890s after Germany. I'm not sure who this is. From a woman's travel notes on England in 1892. After Germany, where women apparently take no interest in public affairs and seem to obey the letter of the young emperor's injunction, let women devote themselves to the 3 Ks, Küche, Kirche, Kinder. So it's basically saying we don't want women involved in politics. We want them focused on these things. And there's an obvious reason why the Nazis were interested in that as a hierarchy that they would enforce.
It's been, pretty sure, the last time I heard of the 3Ks was in like 4chan incel circles as a way to talk about how women should not be outside the home or should not be employed. So Prager, again, telling on himself there about like the kinds of people that are calling into his program. I mean, he could have talked to Sam Seder, but Sam got confused and said he'd been divorced 3 times, not twice.
I love this. In August 1899, the influential British liberal Westminster Gazette elaborated on the story, mentioning as well the 4th K. Apparently, there's sometimes a 4th K. A story titled "The American Lady and the Kaiser," the Empress's 4Ks, describes an audience given by the Kaiser to 2 American suffragettes. After hearing them out, the Kaiser replies, "I agree with my wife." And do you know what she says? She says that women have no business interfering with anything outside the 4Ks. The 4Ks are Kinder, Kuche, Kirche, and Kleider. That's children, kitchen, church, and clothing. So
very,
very brave of him to agree with his wife.
I know, honestly, Andrew Tate would not agree with
that.
Whoa. But it is like, guess he was married to a Phyllis Schlafly type. And I guess I got it wrong, guys. I'm sorry, it was not Mike Myers. It just kind of looks like him in the GIF. Please forgive me. Prager.
Which GIF are you talking about?
Is it GIF or GIF? I
GIF.
used to say GIF, and then I got corrected.
I think I don't know where the GIF stuff comes from, but
Am I the baddie?
Yeah, you're bad now.
I only say GIF because the word, the G word, has a hard G.
I thought that too, but people told me I was wrong, and now I've gone all the other way, and I can't go back.
Yeah, no, I'm very uncertain about it because I always think graphic GIF, but then people say GIF, and I just don't. I'm jury's out for me at least.
J Money says, pretty sure just because the Nazis did it doesn't mean it's bad, should only be applying to infrastructure like the Autobahn and not their ideological slogan. But I don't know, maybe I'm just a lip.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also it's important not to give the Nazis too much credit for those infrastructure projects, all of which were like Weimar era sort of desires.
All right, we're going to take one more call. Calling from a 757 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hey, I'm Harrison. I'm from Virginia, and I guess I wanted to talk about student debt cancellation.
Harrison from Virginia. Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I recently heard that Joe Biden was going to cancel like $10,000 in student debt. I kind of have a problem with the whole there's a dollar amount attached to that, because obviously student debt should be canceled permanently, or not permanently, but every dollar amount should be canceled, and that student debt payment should be permanently canceled. Gosh darn it, I'm tripping over myself.
It's all good. You're doing great.
You don't want debt payments to be restarted, because that kind of, if you imply like you want to cancel 10,000 or 50,000, it implies you want to restart student debt payments, which is what we absolutely do not want. And another thing is how we have it set up today is because the federal government owns over 90% of student debt. That usually just means that that just punishes, people who want to get an education, straddling them with that debt. It's just punishing them for wanting to get an education, and that affects poor people the most.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little nervous.
No, you were good.
Okay. Another thing is that the federal government doesn't need money, because it doesn't gather money from taxes. Or at least when it comes to the federal government and Congress spends the money into existence.
Yes, so, that's the deficit myth.
You know what? I actually recently picked that book up. Unfortunately, I got it from the public library. I had to return it. I plan on actually purchasing it.
It's a great book.
I would agree. And and I know one of my organizations, that one thing we're planning on doing is maybe writing a letter to Bobby Scott, who he's probably the second most important person when it comes to student debt cancellation, because I believe he's the head of the Education Committee in Congress.
That's right. That's right. He's the head of the House Education Committee. Yep.
Yeah, and the 757 area code is the Hampton Roads area, which he represents. The I'm going to say the Newport News and Portsmouth and Suffolk and Norfolk areas of Virginia, which is where I'm sort of from. I'm currently in Williamsburg right now, and I'm represented by someone else. Yeah, that's one thing we're doing. And then I know once the organization I'm a part of, which is called VA Progressives, we actually managed to get a resolution through to two DSA chapters, Tidewater and Charlottesville, talking about, calling Joe Biden to cancel all student debt, with the first part being is that, well, 56% of Virginia adult residents have student loan debt, with the average debt of $30,000. Which, if you cancel 10,000, well, now they have like 20,000 or more left, and that still punishes them. And, well, that still screws a bunch of people over, especially our poorest.
Yes, it does. It was certainly not enough. Appreciate the call.
He could have also canceled the there shouldn't be no interest accruing on any of this debt. That should be done and canceled and ceased. But yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys, that was the final call, so I'm turning on the voicemail. Sorry if you were hanging on. We're going to do one more clip, read some IMs, and then we are going to get out of here. Let's do this Jared Kushner thing. So Jared Kushner is promoting his book. We get to hear more from Jared Kushner. Isn't that lovely? Weren't you waiting to hear more from this, I don't know.
The world peace guy?
Yeah, right. The person who solved the Middle East.
Seems so solved.
I know, right? From his perspective, probably, Israel is continuing to subjugate and kill Palestinians as we speak ahead of their next election cycle, because nothing gets the voters in Israel energized more than some blood and conflict with Palestinians. But he went on Fox and was speaking with Bill Hemmer about who else? His father-in-law, Donald Trump. And if Trump made a mistake with taking now what seems to be like 700 pages of highly classified material from the White House and keeping it at Mar-a-Lago with a padlock, and Kushner doesn't necessarily give a straight answer here, which I think is interesting.
Did he make a mistake by taking that material to Florida?
Like I said, I'm not familiar with what was in the boxes, but I think President Trump, he governed in a very peculiar way, and when he had his documents, I'm assuming he did what he thought was appropriate.
When you wrote your book, did you have any difficulty working with the archivist and trying to get documents if you wanted to refer back to something?
No, we were able to work through it. We didn't really have to rely on the archivists. We knew I decided to do this in December as I was leaving, and so I was able to make sure that we got sign-offs for any material that I needed.
Because that's the primary concern with documents. There is the ease in which these former White House officials and Donald Trump himself could write their own book, so they could enrich themselves a little bit further.
I also like how Kushner is. I like how Kushner is like sort of like slyly being like, "Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong."
Yes,
he was like, "Yeah, it actually wasn't me."
But that's what you keep getting closer and closer in degrees to Trump, right? In terms of former Trump officials who are using their cachet from the Trump administration to now go publicly and say, I'm not like him. I didn't do anything wrong. It's more sensitive for Kushner because they're family, but that's where all of these Trump officials have been buttering their bread, which is like, I'm a right winger, I'm a terrible person, I'm an opportunist, and I use the Donald Trump administration as a way to enrich myself and move up the ladder. And I was a part of it, but when I chose to leave, or when he forced me out, now I've decided that I am a saint who's going to criticize him publicly and sell a lot of books. John Bolton is the ultimate example of that. who might even be a worse guy than Donald Trump himself, and is still trying to position himself as some moral authority figure here. But Kushner, man, like he did not want to answer that question because it just is such an impossible stance for them to take here. These were the guys. Hillary's emails, the server, she should be locked up for not going through proper procedure. And I do think that she got arrogant and wanted things private for her own political gains when she was Secretary of State. There was a kernel there, but they made it a big thing. And it was part of the reason why she lost the election in 2016. I don't think it was the primary one, but it was indicative of like her larger arrogance. Now, this is way worse. Donald Trump held on to classified material for God knows what, potentially for blackmail purposes, leverage purposes at the very least. At the worst case, the sale of secrets for his own personal enrichment, which has been some of the speculation, although we don't know. It's indefensible. And so even somebody like Kushner, who's so close to him, he's got to come out and be like, sidestep that question. I would love to see if this guy goes on any media that isn't entirely friendly to him. Like Bill Hemmer, this is the news part of Fox, right? Like they try to present themselves as a bit more respectable, but they're still going to be friendly to Kushner because they see him as one of their own.
And it's hard to even say that.
I know, but I would love for him to actually get interviewed and see if how he answers these questions.
No, for sure. And I don't even say that about Hemmer. Sorry, Emma. I mean for the fact that it's not really Hemmer because he's kind of like the Brett Baer line similarly, but Dana Perino's on the 5 all the time. That's just an opinion show where she talks about like how like libs are too worried about getting sunburned. It's the line is so thin. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if Dwight Gardner's review of the book in the New York Times, which I suggest anyone who'd like to get a good laugh should read that, which was a complete and utter like pan of Kushner's book. I can't imagine he'll want to do too many interviews like that with mainstream press.
Because it's so difficult for him to maintain his like, I am the respectable corporate guy, which
everyone is mean to me.
That was his whole identity before this happened. Like Trump never thought he was going to win, right? He thought this was going to be a great vehicle for him and the rest of his family, Ivanka and Jared, to get some more money and get some more publicity. And then he did, and they didn't know their ass from their face. And like they were just tripping over ethical quandary after ethical quandary on their quest for more cash. And so Kushner was very happy being the son of a prominent real estate developer, married to the daughter of a prominent real estate developer, crazy reality TV guy, and just getting wealthier and wealthier. And so like this kind of polite discourse he feels comfortable trafficking in, but when it gets to the actual reality of how Trump conducted himself in office, like someone needs to pin these guys down because he's not going to be able to defend it. He's just not. All right. We're going to read like 10 IMs and then we are going to get out of here. Sam saw some pies. I had a super negative interaction with the police in a small city in New York called Canandaigua recently.
Canandaigua.
Canandaigua. Okay, you just say it. I was getting sleepy and pulled over at the gas station, which happened to be closed, to take a 20-minute nap before finishing my hour-long drive home, just to be woken up minutes later by 2 officers who harassed and intimidated me for 20 minutes or so before having to respond to something else in the area. I was just trying to rest and be safe, but they were more concerned with the private property I was parked on and to make sure they knew that I knew that they knew I was lying, and that if I didn't cooperate, things would go very badly for me. I'm lucky I'm considered white. How would you lodge a complaint with the city in this case? Is it even worth it?
I mean, that's a really good question because I probably wouldn't think it was worth it.
Yeah, it's probably not worth it because from like a technicality perspective, they'll say you're trespassing on private property. You're not allowed to do this. It's ridiculous. And it also is a great example of how this is the role of police. It's to protect private property, but that is their role. So I don't know if you'd win that. Mark Monkey, GIF GIF spoken with a soft J sound originated from the creator of the format. All right.
Oh, there you go.
I don't really give a crap, to be honest with you, but I appreciate the info. James Carville Ice Cream. Hey, Emma, regardless of the political differences we may have with him, can you at least acknowledge that Tim Pool is an absolute rock god?
Oh God,
we'll have more. I think that drops tomorrow. The full
Let's go.
video. So maybe we'll either have that tomorrow or Friday.
Yeah, we gotta watch that.
Let's go. Majority Report. Also cancel Emma for saying GIF like that. Majority Report. Majority Report will rise again. Haha. Dan from Columbus. Do you think Andrew Tate knows the 3Ks? Probably. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. 3Ks in a row, huh? What could possibly go wrong? I know. Amuse douche. Does the loan forgiveness work for the Groomer Academy at PetSmart?
I mean, a good point. That's another bit of occupational debt that is just appalling.
Yeah. Emma's adequate microphone. Jordan Peterson, 15 years before the Xanax coma. I think that's about Andrew Tate. All right, 5 more. Tit for Tate. Guys, as a 20-year-old virgin, I really want to know, why do we tag fascists and nutjobs as incels? I am an incel, but I don't have the same habits and feel disgusted when terms like incels are used for fascists and misogynists. It's a shorthand. I don't mean any offense. And
I mean, it's a self. I mean, I think we run into this whenever we use the term, but it is a self-identification for these sorts of right wingers who followed this. Folks, and it's not like, I mean, I understand that. I guess some people are sensitive to like other sorts of celibacy, but like, I just think like this is people know in this show what we're talking about when we talk about incels.
Also, sorry, I don't. It's earnestly, I do not mean to be flippant or rude about this at all. But while it might not be mutually exclusive, a lot of these many fascists and many gunmen in this who have had both labels copped to both themselves.
You don't need to label yourself as an incel. If you're a virgin, you're a virgin. Like, right. I mean, by the technical term, maybe you're involuntarily celibate if you're seeking it out, but like you don't need to identify that way.
Like the ways the guys like Elliot Rodger, the guy who in Santa Barbara killed his roommates and shot up a Planet Fitness, he defined himself as an incel, and incels on those message boards use him as one of their paragons, but and use his manifesto.
Fuentes.
Yeah. So it's I don't think it's just a flip and term. I think there is actual ideology and actual intention behind that term in many contexts.
I mean, there's specifically the term involuntary, I think, does have a sort of ideological hang up because it doesn't talk about some sort of entitlement or like that some woman should be volunteered to them or something like that. Like yeah. So I mean, I'd be a little bit less sensitive about that.
OMG GOP W2F says, hi guys, wanted to let you know that Monday's description on app and Apple Podcast doesn't include the YouTube Fun Half link. Can you update? Yeah, just so you guys know that this week our publishing might be a little bit different because we have someone filling in for Dorsey who is on vacation. So that's why, but let us know if there are any other hiccups. All right, and the final I am of the day. Evan from Portland. My partner was a university professor before she became a housing activist. She still has $60K in loan debt. It's unconscionable. And I'm sorry you have to deal with that. All right, guys, awesome stuff. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks, Bradley and Matt, and appreciate you all. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie fall, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the where the choice is made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.